Okay, before we begin reading today, I want to thank, of course, our publisher, HarperCollins Publishing, and our author, Ivy Ruckman, for allowing us to make these read alouds possible with our students. 8 o'clock. Arthur and I flipped on the TV screen as soon as we got back to my house. He chucked his sack containing the clean socks and Fruit of Loom underwear onto the sofa and then stretched out there himself. Channel 5 or 1011? I asked. 1011. I moved his feet and I sat down next to him. I could hear Mom in the kitchen sewing away on Grandma Hatch's birthday dress. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Fast, then slow, and then a long running stretch where Mom gunned it for all she was worth. Arthur made one of his terrific accelerating noises, and we both doubled up laughing. The TV show was already started, but that rarely bothers Arthur and me when we're watching something funny like Laverne and Shirley or Happy Days. We can tune in any old time. When the first commercial came on, I went to the kitchen for some potato chips. I couldn't believe what I saw there. The curtains at the kitchen window were blowing straight in. They looked like something that a cartoonist might draw. "Hey," I shouted for Mom to look. "Isn't that crazy?" I leaned over the sink to peer out, but the super breeze nearly flattened me. "Would you close that, please?" Mom said. "It's suffocate or blow away. One or the other. You did put your bike in the garage, I hope?" "Yup." I opened up the cupboard where we kept the chips. "Do you suppose Dad and Grandpa got the tractor running yet?" I asked. "Probably." She lifted the presser foot, and I heard her snip the threads. If Arthur hadn't been there, I would have sat down and watched her sew. I loved her new sewing machine. It was the last thing that she bought before she quit her hair boutique job. She really knew how to operate it, too. Forward, reverse, flip, snip, zigzag, zigzag. I made zigzagging motions in the air until Mom asked what in the world I was doing. Then I remembered why I had come into the kitchen in the first place. "We're all out of chips, Dan, if that's what you want." So I settled for soda crackers. I watched Mom as she held the top half of the lavender dress at arm's length to inspect it. "I wonder if Mother Hatch wants her skirt gathered or pleated," she said, more to herself. "Why not do both?" I suggested. Mom just grinned, and she blew a strand of hair out of her face, then pushed back her chair and went to the phone. "I'll be sorry if I don't ask her." "Well, that's funny," I heard her say a minute later. I looked up from spreading peanut butter on the crackers to see her staring at the mouthpiece. She clicked the little chrome piece up and down and then dialed again. "Oh, now it's ringing, but nobody's answering," she mumbled. "Where would Grandma Hatch be on a night like this?" I shrugged and carried the plate of crackers back into the living room. Arthur was so glad for the arrival of food that we almost missed the severe weather announcement that was coming on the TV. "In the St. Paul area just north of Grand Island." I heard that much. Mom rushed in through the dining area. "Listen!" Shh, she shushed us. "In effect, until further notice is given, warnings are being issued for St. Paul, Dannebrog, and the surrounding rural areas. Funnel clouds have been sighted near Dannebrog. Persons in those vicinities are urged to take all possible precautions." Mom had her hand over her heart. "St. Paul, that's northwest. Thank God." Arthur sat up, his eyes round. "Grandpa's farm is east, close to Phillips," I explained. "Well, St. Paul is too close for comfort," Mom added. "Do we have to go to the basement?" I asked, because now that we were set for the next show, I hoped not. Mom didn't answer. She had her face right up against our big front window, shielding her eyes and trying to see out. Normally, she's a lot more casual about storms than Dad is, but she looked worried. "It is pitch black out there," she said. "I've never seen it this dark so early." It was noisy outside as well as dark. Our shake shingles were flapping and smacking overhead. It made me think that somebody might be up there playing a xylophone on our roof. Minerva didn't like the weather either. She was crouched underneath Dad's chairs with her ears back. No wonder. She would be carried off like a tumbleweed in one of those stiff prairie winds. I was glad when Mom pulled the drapes shut for us. Do we have to go downstairs? I asked again. Not yet, Danny, but we'll keep listening to the TV. Arthur spoke up. Now, tornadoes move from southwest to northeast, remember? I remembered. Our science class had taken a field trip in April to visit the weather service station out by the airport. The meteorologists had shown us how they get a hook echo on their radar and how they post watches and all that technical stuff. Arthur made arm motions toward the plant that was hanging in the corner of the room. It'll head off that way, someplace. His expert opinion should have made me feel better, but it didn't. He helped himself to another cracker and then settled back onto the sofa cushions. He wasn't worried. Mom's forehead puckered as she walked away. I knew it was on her mind. We were both wishing that Dad was home. We watched TV another few minutes, but I couldn't get into it like before. Not that I was scared exactly. I had been through dozens of tornado watches in my life, and nothing ever happened. Though a barn roof did get rearranged over by Clay Center one year. Every spring, practically, we have to hit it for the cellar, as my grandpa puts it. But when a tornado watch changes into a warning, and when the sirens start, well, that's when things aren't so mellow anymore. Shouldn't you call your mother, Arthur? My mom said to him after trying the phone again. I'm not sure she's going to want you to stay here tonight. Oh, Mom, I groaned. There I was, thinking that the sun rose and set on me again. Wait, I better call Goldie first, Mom said. Somebody should run over and check on Mrs. Smiley. When she turns her hearing aid down. After a while, she hung up again. Doesn't anybody stay home, she muttered. By then, I was standing at the kitchen doorway, trying to tell her about Aunt Goldie and how she'd probably gone bowling. Who are you calling now? I asked instead. Her attacks on the phone were suddenly more interesting than what was happening in living color on the 9-inch screen. Mrs. Smiley, shh. She's trying to finish her needlepoint cushion for the Presbyterians. Arthur piped up from the sofa. Yeah, I whispered, in Mom's face, remembering. And I'm supposed to tell you not to forget she's coming Friday, for you to fix her hair. All the while, Mom was waving her hand at us to be quiet, so I backed away. The next thing I knew, she was at the hall closet putting on her red windbreaker over her jeans and Hastings College t-shirt. She doesn't answer, she said. I'm going to drive over there and make sure she has her TV on. I won't be gone for long. Now listen, both of you. We listened. She was using a very firm voice. I want you to take this flashlight. She got it off the shelf and handed it to me. And a blanket, and put it downstairs in the bathroom. I want you to do it this minute. I nodded, trying the flashlight to make sure that it worked. If the sirens start, get Ryan and go downstairs. Don't wake him up if you don't have to. All right? Arthur's eyes got big listening to Mom. He told me once that they never go down to the basement during windstorms. That figures. They moved here from California. What did they know? You ever hear of a tornado hitting good old CA? Mom went to go get a blanket. I'll be right back, she told us, hooking her purse onto her shoulder. I'm sure nothing's going to happen, but we'd have to be prepared, right? Your father would have a fit if we ignored the siren. She smiled and waved her car keys at us as she left, barely squeezing out before the door slammed shut again. Whoo-wee, Arthur exclaimed. It sounds like my bull roar outside. I hurried downstairs with the emergency stuff, and I set it on the bathroom counter. Minerva went with me, scurrying across my feet on the steps and acting the way she does when she wants attention. I picked her up by the middle, smoothing down her stripes and balancing her on the glass door of the shower. Usually, she'll do a tightrope act for me, but she only yowled and jumped off. After giving me her mean jungle look, she sat down to dig in her ear. You got a flea in there? I asked, bending to give her a good scratch. But she didn't like that either. Upstairs, Arthur was hooting and hollering again, and I decided I was missing all the good parts, so I hurried up the 2 short flights of steps with Minerva dashing ahead of me. Somewhere in there, in the middle of all of that comedy on the screen, the sirens began. Now that is a very sobering sound. It's unlike anything else, having its own built-in chill factor. I thought of Mom first. She would hear it and she'd come back, I told myself. And then I thought of Dad and how far the farm was from town. They wouldn't even hear the sirens out there. In half a second, I was at the telephone dialing 555-2379. There were 4 rings, and then I heard Grandma's voice. "Grandma!" I shouted into the phone. "Where have you been? There's a tornado just north of GI. The sirens are going off. Can you hear it?" A voice said something, but it sounded so far away. "Talk louder, Grandma. I can't hear you." The voice faded away entirely, and I wasn't even sure that it was Grandma now. "There's a tornado coming. Can you hear me?" Finally, there was nothing else on the line but the sound of another phone ringing very faintly, as if it was in New York or someplace far away. I couldn't figure it out. By then, Arthur was standing next to me. I was just about to hand him the phone when, abruptly, the siren stopped. It didn't taper off, it just quit, as if somebody had snipped it off with scissors. Except for the TV, everything around us suddenly seemed very still. "Hey," he said, raising his eyebrows. "They changed their minds." I hung up the phone. I didn't know what was happening. "Maybe they got their weather signals crossed," he suggested happily. "I mean, they could, you know. I read a book once about that happening, where this whole fleet of fishing boats were put out to sea." He rattled on and on. I ran to the door, thinking that I might see Mom pulling into the driveway, but no luck. "It quit blowing," I called over my shoulder to Arthur, and sure enough, the wind had died down. Maybe the storm wouldn't amount to anything after all. Well, that nice, comforting feeling had hardly entered my mind when the sirens blared forth again. With a jolt, I remembered what Mom had told us to do. "We always turn on the radio," Arthur said, already on his way to the kitchen. "Do you want me to? I'll get the weather station." I was hardly listening. I hurried down the bedroom hallway to Ryan's room at the end. I hated like everything to get him up. He would cry. I knew he'd wake up and cry, and without Mom, Arthur and I would have him screaming in our ears the whole time. When I saw him in his crib, peacefully sleeping on the side of his face with his rear end up in the air, I just didn't have the heart to wake him up. I would wait a minute or two, and Mom would be back. Anyway, it was blowing over, I told myself. It won't last. Quietly, I closed the door behind me. That's when the lights started flickering. In the hallway, I practically had a head-on collision with Arthur, who was coming at me really fast. The look on his face scared me. There's no... What? "There's no radio reception anymore. It just went dead, and the guy kept saying, 'Tornado alert, tornado alert,' and then it went dead." I rushed back into the living room, and the TV was flashing these big letters that filled the entire screen. CD, CD, CD. "What does that mean?" Arthur asked. "Civil Defense Emergency." I whirled around. "I'm getting Ryan." The lights flickered again. At the same time, we heard these really strange sounds that stopped us in our tracks. They were coming from the bathroom and the kitchen. It was sucking sounds. The drains were sucking. I felt this awful pulling on my ears, too, as if there were vacuums on either side of my head. "I've got to go home," Arthur cried, all of a sudden bolting for the door. I ran after him. "You're not. You can't." I grabbed the back of his t-shirt and I hauled him around and pushed him towards the stairs. "Get down there. I have to get Ryan. Now go." I don't know what I would have done if he hadn't minded me. We were catching the fear from each other. And even though the sirens were screaming on and off again, so I didn't know what they were telling me, I knew we had to get to cover fast. The lights went out for good just before I reached Ryan's room. That's the end of 8 o'clock.